Welcome back to part 2. So we've got this far with the dragon. We now need to think about putting some scales on his body. So let's prepare some ink for that. So I'm going to use the ink diluted to start with. So I'm going to put a little bit of ink onto the plate and then add some water to thin that ink down a bit. Okay, that's looking about right, you know. You don't want it too pale or too dark, about in the middle. So let's get the brush dried off a bit. When you're using thinner ink, paler ink, because it is thinner, it will run more easily. So it's usually the case that you need to dry the brush off even more than if you're using the strong thick ink. So let's just test this and see if we can draw a line without it running too much. That's not too bad, but it's a little bit thick where it's running a bit much, so I'm going to just block the brush a bit more. Get a little bit more of that ink out. If you find your brush starts to split when you're drying it out more, just run your fingers down it and encourage it back to the point. It's not too bad now. There's two ways that you can do the scales, or two ways that I've done them to show you. On this one, I've just dotted the scales in by putting the brush down, twisting it, picking it up and repeating that action to make the scales. So put the brush down, twist, pick up, put the brush down, twist, pick up, put the brush down, twist, pick up, and so on. And you can build up the scales that way. And if you don't reload, as the brush sort of runs low on ink, you'll get you know, different effects coming through to vary it. But the other way you can do them is the way that I've done on this one, where we've got what's sometimes called pine cone scales. So I'll show you that method as well. To do that one, we need to start off with some guidelines. You can just do them in pencil. I have sketched mine in pencil on here, but I'm going to do them in ink as well, just for a bit of extra demonstration and practice. So you want to think of the curved surface of the dragon's neck when you do these, and come from one side to the other in a sort of a slightly diagonal curve. So I'm sort of going across from one side of the neck to the other, but I'm thinking about the fact that it's a curved surface, so therefore the line is going to curve, and I'm coming at a slight angle. So that's the one that way, and then we come crossways the other way. So that's given us the guidelines to put the scales in. Now I'm going to re-ink the brush again with the stronger ink to put the scales in. You may find it easier to do this grid just with pencil when if you're just started Chinese painting, because it is harder to control the thinner ink. So you may find it easier just to do them in pencil today. So we then imagine that each of those little diamond shapes are a scale, one of the scales, and we start to draw them in with a curved stroke. You'll probably find that you need to modify the lines, you know, the way you put the scales in relation to the lines, you know, because of it sort of changes angle. You can't sort of do it exactly, you have to adapt the pattern as you go, but it gives you a starting point as to where to place the scales. So you see there's one there that's going to be too big, so I'll make that into 2. And in other places you'll find that you need to put in an extra bit to make it fit. Don't forget to check your grip at regular intervals. Just make sure you haven't gone back to the grip that probably feels more natural to you, but that you've stayed with that Chinese grip. With the brush, it is, as a beginner, it is something, you know, you have to sort of consciously work at. But it pays off in the end, because then as you progress, your technique will be better because you're using the brush correctly. So that's put in the scales. I have noticed that I've missed off another important feature of the Chinese dragon, which are the barbules. If you know anything about carp, fish, you'll know that they have little feelers or barbules either side of the mouth, and this is a feature that the Chinese dragon has too. So to put them in, I've dried my brush off as much as I can by patting it on my kitchen towel, and then I put the brush upright and I just skate with the very tip of the brush across the surface of the paper. So it's either side of his nose they emerge from, and usually this is they're painted in quite a squiggly, flamboyant line. So having done that, I'm going to now go back to a more dilute ink. So I'll just wash my brush out, get rid of that strong ink. This is why you need several jars of water. You need sort of a dirty jar of water, a medium jar of water, and a clean jar of water, really, because the pigment of this ink is so strong that it quickly makes the water go black. So here we have that pale ink again. I'm going to wipe my brush there and then do some blotting. Always twisting the brush to get it to come back to a point. So let's just check how that works on the paper before we commit to the painting. So for this bit we're doing a sort of a little dot to represent a shadow that one scale casts on the one below it. So it's a little dot that we're looking for this time. So let's put those in. So where you've got two scales joint next to each other, and then another one underneath, that little dot goes on the one underneath at that point where the other two above touch. You can think of it as sort of them casting a shadow, and again you'll find that sometimes the pattern doesn't quite do that, and you have to adjust where you put that shadow dot. But I think that sort of irregularity is quite appealing, really, to my mind anyway, in this style of painting. I think if it was sort of very mathematically precise, it doesn't sort of match the style of the painting so well. So there's my dots put in. The last bit of ink work I want to do is a little bit of shadow work, shading we would call it. So again, make sure your brush is dry so that you don't deliver too much ink onto the paper. And then this time, instead of using the brush upright, we can tip it over on its side. The grip of the brush doesn't change, we just tip the brush over and use it on its side, and you can sort of scratch or tickle the paper a little bit to add a bit of shading here and there. So for example, the back of his mouth here, that would be darker, and then as we come forward towards the front of the mouth, that would peter out. Or I put some shading under the eye there, maybe underneath these strands of hair. You could do so for the, where we've got these spine pieces, so we could put a little bit of shadow where the one on top is casting a shadow on the one underneath. But I'm really just contacting the paper. It's sort of a tickling of the paper so that we deliver just a tiny little bit of ink to the paper, rather than sort of applying it like a wash. It's not a wash really, it's more you're just tickling the surface of the paper so that you get a very broken application of ink. So that's put a little bit of shading on there. The last thing I want to do is put some cloud forms onto the dragon as he's sort of emerging from the clouds. And I've used a very classical Chinese pattern of clouds, which is the spiral. So we have sort of opposing spirals. So if we go down to this corner here, we can think of it as sort of two opposing spirals. So one comes this way, and then we have some fluffy cloud bits, and then we have another spiral coming from the opposite way here. And then you can sort of build on that idea to create the clouds as you see fit, really. As a beginner, this is probably one of the hardest parts of this painting to do, because you need the brush to be quite dry, and you need to control how much ink is delivered onto the paper with each movement of the brush. So if you're finding this part difficult, you know, don't worry, this, you know, I would expect this to be, you know, quite difficult for you, because it's learning where the surface of the paper is, and so that you can just contact it with the brush to deliver a very small, sort of fine amount of ink, is kind of one of the skills that takes a bit of practice to learn. So if you're finding this a little bit, you know, a little bit challenging, you know, don't be put off. That's quite, you know, to be expected as a beginner. So we can build up with repeating this sort of idea of the wisps of curling cloud until our dragon is nicely emerging. He's got some nice clouds to emerge from here. There are other ways of painting clouds, lots of other ways of painting clouds in Chinese painting, but this is quite a good technique to practice, because it gives you lots of practice at learning the sort of the hand-eye coordination of, so that you can get the brush to just contact the page to deliver that lighter stroke. So obviously as soon as you press too hard you get a much heavier stroke that is less sort of descriptive of a billowing fluffy cloud. I'll do a little bit more over here. You'll notice that I've got my fingers of my hand, I'm not holding the brush with, holding the paper steady. This does help you to know where the surface of the paper is, so if you're not doing that already, that's another thing that can help you. So there's the clouds for the dragon to emerge from. So you can, you know, leave it there. I will be showing you how to do the calligraphy for the dragon. I think we'll do that next, for those of you that may not have colour. So we'll have a look at the calligraphy for the dragon. If you have a seal, of course, you can place a seal here, because the whole composition is designed on the diagonal to have this seal as a visual stop at the end. But if you don't have a seal, and you may not, I have put in this example the word for dragon in this corner, so let's have a look at that. I have demonstrated this before, but we'll have another look at it now so that we can put that onto our painting. So you'll need another piece of A4 paper if you want to have a practice at this before we put it into our picture. So I'll weigh this down. And for the calligraphy you want the brush fully charged with ink. So I've completely filled the brush with ink, and then I wipe to get rid of the excess so that it doesn't drip when I hold it up. So let's start on the left. If you watched one of my previous videos, you'll remember that we start on the left. We go first left, then right, first top, then bottom. So we're going to start again with a dot for this word or character, for dragon, and we start in the middle of the dot. So we start in the middle of the dot, the brush is upright, and we go a little movement to the top right hand corner, turn, 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 and lift off inside the dot. We're then going to do the horizontal stroke. A little movement to the top left corner with the tip of the brush, then press down, and we pull the brush across to make that horizontal stroke. Lift up, push down, and tuck in at the end. And when you do the horizontal strokes, try to keep the brush always pointing to that top left corner. So we've got two more dots, one there. This one is slightly different in that it's more like we lift off to the left of the page to exit the stroke, rather than lifting off within the dot. So here comes another horizontal stroke, a little movement to the top right, then top left rather, then we press down. As you move the brush on the horizontal, keep the tip, press it pointing towards that top left corner. When you come to the end of the stroke, rise up a little bit on the tip, press and tuck in. We then do a vertical stroke, so it starts the same way but we go down the page next. So a little movement to the top left corner, press, drag down the page and rotate to exit the stroke inside the shape. Little movement to the top left corner, press, travel, 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 lift up a bit and press, trying to get a 45-degree slant on that stroke as you press. That's the cornering stroke. We then come down, flip the tip of the brush over and lift slowly to create that sort of tick shape. We've got two horizontals inside this shape. One, two. And that's the first half done. We then move to the second half, which starts with a vertical stroke. So a little movement to the top left corner and press. Release that pressure slightly so that you can drag the brush down the page and then tuck in and lift off within the shape. There's a small horizontal here, and then we make another sort of box type turning. So a little movement to the top left with the tip of the brush, press, travel along, come up a bit and then press and make sure the brush is pointing to that top left corner so that you get a 45-degree angle there on the turn. And then come down and tuck back in. Another horizontal stroke. And then we do a stroke that's sometimes called the dragon's tail. So we make as if to make a horizontal stroke, a vertical stroke, turning to go down the page. We then corner There's the dragon's tail now. We press the brush a little bit more to give it that tension, and before we lift off gradually to make a tick shape, or like a thorn if you like. So that's the dragon's tail, and to finish the word or character we put in 3 more little horizontal strokes. Each time we aim to have that 45-degree slant on the end of the stroke. So that's our word or character for dragon. So I'm going to put that on my painting now, the dragon. You may want to practice a bit more before you do that, or you may wish to leave that step out, it's up to you. I'm drying the brush off a little bit more because obviously it's going to have to be put on much smaller, so I'm making the brush a lot drier to help me to do that. So we have a dot, the first horizontal, 2 dots that seem to sort of face each other, 1, 2, another horizontal. Then we travel down the page. This shape here is what we call a radical, which also it means moon on its own, that shape. So there's that side of the character done. And then we come up to the top. Always working top to bottom, that's the general rule. Here's the dragon's tail. Press and lift, and 3 little horizontals coming off that. So there's the word or the character for dragon. I just want to briefly finish off with putting a little bit of colour onto our painting.